I am super excited to introduce to you today our first speaker. Our first speaker is Chris Hartley, who is from CERN, which in my personal opinion is one of the most important organisations in our world. They are literally helping us understand how the fabric of our universe works, which enables us as a human race to go forth and prosper. So, majorly excited today. Chris is responsible for all procurements at CERN, and he manages knowledge transfer at CERN, so pretty important job. We're delighted that he's going to be here today to help us understand, how digital helps them to investigate the universe at CERN. He's had a very, very vast career. I'm not going to take up too much time because I'm guessing you're going to have a lot of questions at the end. So without further ado, I'm sure you're all excited for me to welcome Chris up to give us his first speak of the day. Thank you, Chris.
So, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Esther, for the very kind introduction. A big pleasure to be here with you all today. And as Esther has described, I work at CERN, and I thought I'd start the presentation a little bit by telling you a bit about CERN. Some of you probably know a lot of what we do already, and others will know less. So in order to talk about how we use digital technology and what we use it for, I think it's good to begin with what CERN is and what we're doing. So CERN is the world's biggest laboratory for particle physics, so studying the fundamental aspects of physics. It's located on the shores of Lake Geneva. We sit across the border between France and Switzerland. To give you an idea of the scale, there you can see the Geneva Airport runway there, and then the white circle around there is the Large Hadron Collider of CERN, and CERN itself is over two sites. One in a place called Meran, the main site, and then just close to it, the Preslin site as well. And the goal of CERN is to understand the fundamental laws and particles that make up our universe, and to understand where that all comes from. So how we do that, we have 4 missions that are the pillars of CERN from CERN's founding in the 1950s. But I would say CERN was sort of founded after the Second World War with an intention of bringing scientists from all around the world together, particularly with a European focus, but not exclusively. And it was, following the atom bombs in Japan, etc. It was saying, how can we use nuclear technology, how can we understand together everything that is making up the fabric of the universe? So we have 4 pillars in order to address this: research, collaboration, technology and innovation, and education and training. So I'll talk less today about education and training and about collaboration. Suffice it to say that CERN is made up of 23 member states, most of which are European. We also have many associate member states and collaborations with institutes, universities, and companies from all around the world. We have something like 17,000 people on site on a good day at CERN from every nationality you can imagine all around the world. So what I will talk a little bit more about is our research, because that drives what we're trying to do. Here is an example of one of the experiments at CERN, just to show you quickly. Everything is located underground. I'll say a little bit more about that later on in the talk, but this gives you an idea of the scale of the electronics that we're working on. That's a life-size picture. You can see somebody standing at the front there inside one of the experiments, which is underground. Some people have said it's like a cathedral to science and technology. The cavern that is built in is large enough to fit in the Notre Dame Cathedral inside the cavern under the Swiss Alps. So what we're doing is looking what the universe is made of. Those are people who are sort of the similar age to me will recognize in here how things have changed from when we learned physics at school compared with what's understood today. We start with matter as a key building block, and then, of course, there are atoms. And, originally, atom was the smallest indivisible thing that could exist, right? And then the atom was split, Rutherford, etc. And then now we know that inside the atoms there are neutrons with electron fields, a nucleus inside the atom. Inside the nucleus you have neutrons, you have protons, and inside the protons you have quarks, and we're trying to go lower and lower and lower to understand more and more of the subatomic particles that make up the whole of the universe. So one of the fundamental questions is, how did the universe begin? As you may know, there are now space telescopes are used, such as the James Webb Telescope, which can look back in time. So that effectively what they're doing is they're looking back across the universe to look at light, the sources of light. And if you think about it, because the light has traveled so far, by the time you're looking at it, you're actually effectively looking back in time to where that light came from and when it came from. That takes you back to something like 13.8 billion years ago. What we're interested in doing at CERN is to look at the time before the light was being emitted. So light started to be emitted, it's estimated, about 380,000 years after the Big Bang. So what was happening between the Big Bang occurring and the emission of the light is fundamentally what we're trying to look at. So how do we do that? We try to reproduce the conditions a fraction of the second after the Big Bang to gain insight into the structure of the universe and its evolution since then. There are many questions in fundamental physics that are still not answered, and I think one thing which I think is quite unusual in CERN compared with many other places people develop scientific theories and then they try to test in order to prove that their theories are correct. In a sense, in CERN, we're trying to do the opposite, right? Which is we're trying to see why the existing theories don't explain everything, and we're trying to find out the things that are different than what we would expect it to be. So some of the main questions that are not understood at the moment is, what is the unknown mass of the universe made of? It's estimated that something like 95% of the mass of the universe is things that normally we cannot detect. You hear things like antimatter, dark energy. So why is the universe made only of matter? And we hardly find any antimatter. At CERN, we have succeeded in generating some antimatter, creating some antimatter, but it's known to be very unusual in the experiments of the universe so far. And why that should be the case is not understood. You would expect some more balance in it. You may have heard of the Higgs boson, which I'll talk about a little bit more. One of the questions that we have is there only one type of Higgs boson, and does it behave exactly as expected? And that's something that we're trying to investigate with our current experiments, and looking into the future, we have plans for further experiments in that area. And a very interesting thing, many people in physics are aware that there are theories about how forces are interrelated. So when you look at forces such as electromagnetic forces and you compare them with gravity, gravity is known to be considerably weaker than we would expect it to be based on the model of physics that has been developed, I would say, since the 1950s. And we're trying to understand that. A result that we've had recently, for example, is that antimatter behaves under gravity the same way that matter does, okay, which is in itself very interesting. It's almost as though there isn't a sort of anti-gravity. So that's our mission at CERN, is to investigate those questions. But I would say that is the sort of main physics mission, and I will, in the talk, tell you a little bit more about how we do it and some other things that we do as a result of what we're doing. I mentioned already the Higgs boson, which was proved to exist or discovered in 2012, which is the particle which says that is what gives other elements their mass. Yeah? I'm sure she wasn't a particularly popular person with me or in Scotland, but Margaret Thatcher was actually a scientist prior to becoming a politician, and she once described the Higgs boson as how she felt going through the Conservative Party conference. She said, "I'm unimportant until other people gather around me. Right? And as they gather around me, I become more and more important." And so I think that's one way you can think of the Higgs boson. And there on the right, you see, yes, on the right, yes, you see Professor Higgs, who was the promoter of the Higgs boson, the discoverer of it, I would say, which led to the experiments at CERN. And I just thought it was interesting to mention this morning that he was a professor of physics here at the University of Edinburgh when he came up with those ideas. And I think he's still an emeritus professor at the university. In order to do that, we developed technology in 3 key areas that we're looking at. So the first one is particle accelerators. We accelerate around the Large Hadron Collider, and that requires some very specialized technology. Within the accelerator, we have to have very low temperatures. In many areas, it's at 4 Kelvin or below 4 Kelvin in order to control the particle beams and to have the superconductivity that we require. We have detectors, and then we have a large computing infrastructure to process all the results and indeed to control the systems. So to say a little bit about the Large Hadron Collider, as you may recall, this is the ring that I showed you earlier. It's 27 kilometers in circumference. It's approximately 100 meters underground, under the Alps and under Lake Geneva. We have superconducting magnets which steer the particle beam. So as it's a ring, the particles are shot around, we accelerate them, and as we accelerate them, we also have to control their flow. And for that, we use superconducting magnets. And the particles there are accelerated to very close to the speed of light. It's 99.9999% of the speed of light, which, as one of my colleagues likes to describe it, he said, if you go jogging, the difference between the particle speed and the speed of light is about the speed that you would go jogging at, is the difference. So it gives you some idea of the speed and the energy that we're generating. So the particles are then accelerated around the ring, and we have giant detectors that record the particles formed at the 4 collision points. So this is the idea: you accelerate the particles at very high speed, and then they're collided together, and then you monitor what happens. So we have the 4 of the Atlas, CMS, ALICE, and the LHCb. I don't intend to go into the details of what those different ones do, but they're all aimed at detecting the behavior of subatomic particles as they collide into each other. So the Large Hadron Collider is producing more than 1 billion particle collisions per second when it's running, and the energy of these particles colliding into each other is what converts into new particles. So if you think from the Big Bang, that's effectively what we think happened, that there was a large explosion. We're trying to reproduce those conditions of things crashing into each other and creating new particles, such as the Higgs boson via the collisions. So these detectors, these 4 major detectors, you can consider them as being analogous to 3D cameras. And they detect, they measure the energy and the charge of the new particles. We also try to see which particles are spinning and which ones are moving in a straight direction with no spin, as is the case, as was shown to be the case of the Higgs boson, that it has no spin on it. They're taking something like 40 million pictures per second, okay? But of that, we are only storing about 1,000. Are recorded and stored. And this is the first part, I would say, of my talk where we start to get into the sort of digital technology involved in it. The way that I like to think of this is, let's say that I'm looking for somebody in this room. There's one particular person I want to talk to, but I don't know what that person looks like. Okay? And then you can say, well, the first thing that I can do is I can eliminate a large part of the audience, right? You can say, for example, okay, I know that it's a man that I'm intending to speak to, so I can immediately filter out any particle that is obviously a lady, right? So if you see what I mean, and you start to cut down before you start. And then you say, okay, it's of a certain age range, etc. So I only store those ones that meet those overall characteristics, and then you look deeper into that data until you find the right person that you were looking for. So it's similar to that. So we're looking for, oh, that looks like an electron, that looks like a proton. We don't store that data. It's filtered out automatically by the intelligent detectors in the instrumentation there. The LHC detectors have been built by international collaborations. And these cover all regions of the globe. So this includes universities from the UK as well as UK companies that we work together with. And it's interesting to note that the experiments themselves are not governed by the same governance as CERN as the organization. So you can think of it as CERN is providing the platform for the experiments to do their work, which gives a lot more freedom, I would say, on the creativity of how the technology is used. And then some people say, okay, that's all sort of very nice, but it's all kind of abstract, and does anything useful come out of it for us? So I would like to stress in the process of what we have to do, we generate all kinds of technology that has to be built specifically for CERN. The environment inside the LHC is incredibly difficult environment. It's very high radiation levels, for example, and very low temperatures. So to give you an example of that now, NASA now use detectors that were developed at CERN for inside the tunnel, which is what they use for all their astronauts on the International Space Station missions, all carry those radiation detectors so that they know exactly how safe their astronauts are. You're all in sort of IT background, I would say, so you know, a lot of people talk about recruitment and creation of technologies. So when at CERN we say we're looking for a web developer, we are not talking about people who know JavaScript or Python or Drupal. We're looking for somebody like this guy. This is Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who was working at CERN and decided to create the World Wide Web. So initially, Tim's idea was, I need to be able to exchange the results and data with other people. Yeah? So the fundamental concept of the World Wide Web was a scientific exchange concept originally. How can we have a two-way protocol so that other people can see what I'm doing and they can see I can see what they're doing? And we have many more examples. I'll talk about a few of them in a second. So medical imaging, cancer therapy, material sciences, cultural heritage, by which, for example, we've investigated some paintings in Italy using our technology that you can see through the capes, the layers of the paintings and see what was originally painted underneath, and discovered some interesting artwork underneath. In the aerospace technologies, we're working on that. I'll say a little more, automotive environment, etc. It's worth mentioning a few of our technological innovations which have been particularly, I think, important in the field of medical care. So accelerator technologies are particularly applied in cancer research and cancer treatment. So for radiotherapy with positrons, protons, ions, electrons, basically the technologies that we have to have the Large Hadron Collider controlling very accurately subatomic particles are used for treating cancerous tumors. As I'm sure many of the people would know, one of the main things in medical applications is to try to minimize the damage to the surrounding tissue when you're targeting a specific item such as a cancerous tumor. Also in scans, in the PET scans, the medical imaging and diagnostics. So at CERN, we did not invent the concept of the PET scan. That came from American universities in the late 1950s. What we did was we looked at it and said, okay, we have detectors that we are developing that are more accurate than what are being used by the normal imaging companies. So that was CERN's contribution there. And then also the software to process all the data and to say, how do we detect something which is anomalous and stands out of the ordinary? This is an example of a pixel detector image. This is real, by the way. This is not an artist's impression. This is a real image of what the scans can do now. And if you can compare that with the X-rays that we're sort of all used to seeing, you can see there's somebody wearing a watch. You can see the bone structure. You can see, the doctor can see into the blood flow that is occurring in somebody's arm, in somebody's wrist with non-intrusive technology. So there's no medical incision needed at all in order to generate that. Also, through our facilities, we're able to generate very specific radioactive isotopes, which are important in the pharmaceutical and medical industry. And then I wanted to say a little bit about IT in general. So CERN actually is a huge operation. We have, as I say, sometimes up to 17,000 people on site. It's basically a town within a town, the size of it. And of course, we use IT in all the applications that you would expect. So scientific computing, storage, network, also the technical aspects such as design of new equipment which has never been built anywhere in the world. One of my responsibilities is in procurement, and very often what we do is we model internally in digital models exactly how we want something to work, and then we give that out to industry. Please, will you build this for us? The operations, so the control of the whole Hadron Collider and the beams have to be very tightly controlled. Also, as you can imagine, very high safety constraints on that. And then, of course, all the administrative processes, all the procurement, human resources, all those kinds of things, and collaborative desktops for sharing all the information. Storage services is a very important subject for us in CERN. We have users all around the world. We have the experiments generating the data at something like 250 gigabytes per second of data that's being generated that then has to be stored for further analysis, because one of our sort of underlying principles is don't throw away data that is interesting because you don't know what to do with it, because the physics is always advancing and people are always saying maybe we've got another explanation, and then we need to be able to go back and look at data that we stored potentially 50 years ago. As well as the main 4 experiments, we have 37 other experiments at CERN covering a whole series of other things, such as creation of antimatter. And then we have all our services that we run through those, going into the sort of central column, the storage services, the CERN box, 37,000 users, over 5,000 projects using it. We are able to reconstruct and process the data from all the experiments, and we have a long-term archive. In terms of our data storage at CERN, we have over an exabyte of disk storage now. CERN's data store has now crossed this sort of, I would say, remarkable threshold. Maybe not for people here who are used to the data centers world, but I think for a non-data center specialist organization, it's incredible, and you can see how it's grown over the years and continues to grow. I mentioned earlier that CERN was responsible for the creation of the World Wide Web, and it's this spirit of collaboration of scientific data and sharing it around that's very important to us. We have our worldwide LHC computing grid, which is used to store, analyze, and distribute data to cooperating institutions all around the world. And they themselves process data and return results to us. So we have the central data storage and processing, but around the world we have over 1 million processing cores that are being used in about 170 data centers and across 42 countries. And that leads to more than 1,000 petabytes of CERN data is being stored worldwide. In order to organize all these collaborations, we've invented some of our own tools, which, for example, just as a very simple example, we have a tool called Indico, which we use for organizing all our meetings, all our conferences, and many other people use it. So any institute or university that work with us tend to use these tools. And these tools are available to anybody, because CERN is an international organization. We are not seeking to make profits out of the work we do. That's paid for by the member states' contributions to it. So where we have such tools, we share it. If there are development costs, etc., to enhance it, then we will look at those. But otherwise, our mission is to give the technologies out for better use in society and industry in particular. Nowadays, of course, we're very interested in quantum computing. So the European Open Quantum Institute has recently been allocated to CERN to facilitate the exploration of quantum computing and work with public companies and institutions, private companies, to develop quantum technologies. And it's part of our mission, going back to what I said earlier about education, to build these capacities for our own experience for now and for the future, but also to share our knowledge. I'd like to be clear that we are not a quantum computing company ourselves or institute ourselves. So we are not trying to build a quantum computer. We work with other partners, for example, with IBM. For things like that, what we look at is providing some of the enabling technologies, such as superconductivity, where we're the world leader, and also cooling to cryogenic temperatures well below 10 degrees Kelvin in order to enable the supercomputing possibilities that are required in quantum. And we use AI everywhere in our investigations. I mentioned earlier there's the first level of filtering of AI, of the electronics, which are looking at the particles that are being detected in the detectors and working out which ones to do. And then in many, many places, then what we do is we go further on, and the system itself learns which of the particles that were stored were found to be of interest and were found not to be of interest, and it develops its own intelligence, you could say, with the time, and is permanently refining how the algorithms work. And this, for us, actually is a very big area for the future. One of our, I would say, our strengths is very open science and very open collaboration, and that sometimes can bring you some challenges as well. And one of the challenges that brings us is it tends to be a little bit fragmented, and we've discovered we have lots of people at CERN and in our collaborating institutes, each doing their own thing. And now we're looking at how we can sort of bring that together a little bit better to get us all working together on the same direction. And always asking ourselves the question, what is it that we know and where are we better working with other people? To tell you a little bit of where we are in the sort of more recent times with our digital technology and where we're going. At our Presan site, we've just built a new data center, and we're rolling out to that now. So this has 12 megawatts of power. The power usage efficiency is estimated at 1.15. That's what we're targeting for that, which I think is comparable with many good data centers now. We have the heat capture system that's built into that with all that computing power. So our Presan site, which can house up to 4,000 to 5,000 people working there, we believe that we'll get somewhere between 70 and 100% of the heating required for the entire site will come just from reusing the heat generated in the computing center. So that's part of, as well, a sort of environmental commitment, as well as, of course, being good for cost savings going forward. We're working very much on the AI triggers. I mentioned how the AI triggers currently work, but we really are looking to improve it. We've recently signed an agreement with the Eric and Wendy Schmidt Foundation, so Mr. Google, basically, have given us a very generous donation to work with us on how we develop artificial intelligence algorithms. I would say we were a little bit worried by that at first because we thought they would want control on what we did with the data and how the algorithm worked. But I'm pleased to tell you that's not the case. Though they do, of course, want to have access to the results. We're looking at quantum enabling technologies. I mentioned things like the cryogenic cooling that we have. We also have very specific time control systems, such as the White Rabbit protocol that we use, which is very important in quantum computing. You need to get down to very, very high accuracy in order to control correctly your quantum computing processing. And the superconducting technologies that we've developed for the magnets that, as I mentioned earlier, control the particle beams are of great interest. We're working with Airbus, who are very interested in building hydrogen-powered aircraft to eliminate the fossil fuels in their aircraft. And in order to do that, they need to have a very efficient power transmission system on board the plane. The hydrogen allows us to bring in the cooling technology that you need for superconducting. So having pressurized hydrogen makes the cooling possible. And we're looking with them, we're testing it, actually we're testing it in December, the cable that we've built for them to see whether that is some technology that can go forward in the future. I wanted to mention a little bit about our expenditure. So in 2022, we spent 34 million Swiss francs, which is, well, 32 million pounds in IT infrastructure. So this doesn't include where we buy software solutions and where we buy services from companies, but actually in the IT itself, and that will be significantly higher this year and next year as we fill up the new computing center. When I started at CERN just over 2 years ago, one of the most important challenges that I had, and part of the reason I wanted to be here today and to share this with you, was as an international organization made up of many member states, the member states pay our budget, and then we try to ensure that we give work back to the member states. So we try to ensure that the universities have access to educate people. We try to ensure that companies develop from our knowledge transfer activities, but also real sort of industrial contracts. And the UK was doing extremely badly at the time. So that was one of my major tasks, is to work with the UK community to try to improve that. We work a lot through the Scientific Technology and Facilities Council, STFC, which is part of the UKRI organisation, and we have a very strong cooperation with them to work through that. In the last 2 years, we've increased how much we purchase from the UK companies by 75%. And at least, and I'm hoping, and that will go up even more next year. So for all of those who are interested in providing technology solutions to organizations like CERN, I would encourage you to look at the CERN web pages, look for our procurement and our knowledge transfer possibilities. We're very interested in hearing from you. So finally, my final slide. Recently, we've inaugurated our new sort of, I don't know whether it's a gallery or a museum, but we call it the Science Gateway. It's a new education and outreach center. The idea is that we will educate anybody who wants to come. It's free of charge. In the age range 5 to 105 is what it's targeted at. And I was there on the opening, and I had 7-year-olds explaining quantum technologies and high vacuums at the subatomic particle levels there. And the 7-year-olds are explaining it. It's absolutely incredible. And we also use it for exhibitions and conferences and as an immersive experience. And I'd just like to thank you for your time, invite you for any questions, and invite anybody, if you go skiing in the Swiss Alps, go to the Science Gateway. It's certainly worth a visit. We're averaging over 1,000 visitors a day in there, so you're all very welcome, and thank you.
Absolutely brilliant, and well, that sorted my holiday out for the next one. Wonderful. So we have some people with microphones. If you have a question, if you could put your hand up and just we'll get them seen to. I have a quick question just whilst people warm up a little bit. Really fascinating talk. Thank you so much. And really amazing to find out about the work that you're doing to work with UK's technology companies. I'm hoping that includes UX experience designers. But what I really wanted to know is, what is the best way for companies in the UK to access the information and the learning that you have found out so that we can use your discoveries within our innovations? Just thinking about the applications that you're using, the technologies developing. Do we have to go to the gateway, or is there an alternative route?
Okay, so I would say, depending on exactly what aspects you're interested in, there are two things. So the first thing I would really encourage everybody is to contact the UKRI and the STFC. They have dedicated industrial liaison officers who are absolutely brilliant, absolutely fantastic at talking to companies and saying, okay, what is your area of expertise? And then they talk to us on a regular basis so they know where we have areas of interest which can be of useful for the companies. The other aspect is if you look at the CERN web pages, it's very easy, cern.ch for Switzerland. And there, depending on whether you're interested in procurement opportunities or knowledge transfer opportunities, if you search on those, you will find straight away how you can register your company. We have a suppliers database and a whole set of information for suppliers so they can register and tell us what their area of expertise is, what area they're in, and then through our knowledge transfer activities. And there you can see the technologies that we are currently particularly supporting and see how that fits in with the area that you're trying to grow your business in. The more specific information you can give us, the better. And that allows us to contact the right people. There's a famous story of somebody registering as they had a highly specialized removal company, and we ended up contacting them to ask them to move some radioactive waste around, and we discovered it was actually two men with a white van, two brothers who usually move sofas, so that didn't go. But yeah, please go on our web pages, look on the procurement information and register on the supplier database if you would be interested in supply to us.
Fabulous, thank you. Any more questions from the floor?
How does CERN protect?
Sorry.
Is it not working?
Try again?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. How does CERN protect its data from ransomware and other cyber attacks?
Excellent question. So how does CERN protect your data from cyber attacks and ransomware?
Yeah, so we have a very, I would say, extensive security processes that are in place. We've developed our own cyber security systems. I would say it is challenging because we have a very, very open community. We permanently have people on site coming on, but the actual, I would split it into different categories. Yeah? So we have very tightly controlled sort of personnel data, for example. So the financial systems and the human-related data is protected through very tight sort of cybersecurity protocols, and we're constantly running firewalls and antivirus software in those domains. The scientific data isn't as much protected. That tends to be very, very open. I don't know if that answers your question.
There's actually the scientific data, because you imagine what to look back in time, and if someone's corrupted it.
Right. Yeah, so it's protected in terms of, okay, sorry, I understand your question now better. There is protocols on the incoming, right? So the transfer out of data is relatively easily allowed, I would say. You have to be from a registered institute in order to get into the data. So people sign collaboration agreements with us that then allow us to open the tunnels into it that they can put data out. And then there are dedicated sort of hop nodes for the incoming data when people are transferring data back. And that is checked carefully before being added to the main archive.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? We've got time for maybe one more question. Great.
Hi, it's on. Yeah, cool. It's kind of around data as well. Like, you have a significant amount of data there. Is that do you have some sort of like edge CDN where it's stored, or does like the universities or whatever have their own sort of copy of it? Like, so I can't imagine someone in the US just hits a submit button and sits and waits 20 minutes before it kind of gets found on, a spinning platter somewhere.
Yeah. So as part of the worldwide grid that we have, yes, we have some edge technologies, and what we're doing is that we work out what data should be stored centrally, and then across the grid. You recall I showed you a grid earlier, and there are the various nodes, and it's tiered. It's a tiered approach, so that we have tier 1 centers, and then tier 2 and tier 3. I think it goes down to tier 4, where some of the smaller sort of research labs in the university would be working at tier 4, and then they can go up to a sort of regional tier 3 center or a sort of super regional tier 2 center, so that they rarely have to go back to the tier 1 to transfer large amounts of data from a central node.
Great question. We do have maybe, if someone's got a burning question, one last thing. No, well, I'd like to ask a final question then. you've had an illustrious career, you've done many, many different things. What are you most proud of achieving at CERN? Sorry, that's a bit out of the blue. We didn't practice this one.
I think the thing that I personally am most proud of achieving at CERN, actually, and it's a great question because it's also related to the digital side. I think my job is very much about working with the absolutely brilliant scientists there, but working with it in a way that can be understandable to other people and bringing it forward. It's not, it seriously happens that you get a call from a Nobel Prize-winning scientist who said, "Oh, Chris, can you help me with this today, please?" And the way that they express themselves is often very, very difficult to understand to anybody else. And they want it done now, and I have a Nobel Prize, and what do you mean I can't do it now? But I want a plane to carry my experiment to the United States this afternoon, kind of thing. And I think for me, what I'd be most proud of is being the bridge between, let's say, normal people and the the Sheldon Coopers of this world.
Well, as a normal person, thank you for that, and thank you for everything you do. Can you join me in a round of applause for Chris? Thank you. Brilliant.